Life was getting to be in a rhythm of sorts for Jesus' disciples, and then a bombshell went off and they weren't quite sure what to do. Maybe you felt the same way in the last 2 weeks. On the one hand, life goes on here in Boston in a rhythm we know and understand. We're preparing for Thanksgiving. There are groceries to buy and food to make and travel that may soon occur for you, just as we do every year at this time. Last night, another tradition was honored. A marvelous concert was performed here by the Handel and Haydn Society, commemorating the 200th anniversary of their very first concert in 1815, held in this space on Christmas Day. Next weekend, as I mentioned, Heinrich will be playing a Bach concert, another ongoing tradition of our church concert series. For these remarkable and beautiful traditions that ground us, that uplift us, we give God great thanks. We sing today the old hymns. We praise God in tunes that some of us have known since childhood. But at the very same time, all of us are people of the bigger world, and we know that bombshells went off in Paris and other cities, that a Russian plane was felled, that Brussels has been on lockdown, Harvard had a bomb scare, the news coverage is constant. So we're uneasy. And depending on your particular past histories, the ways you've learned to deal with hardship in the past, you may be finding the Paris tragedies are dominating your mindset. Maybe you've compartmentalized them away in a locked space, or perhaps they're randomly asserting themselves, catching you off guard sometimes with a surge of anxiety, thanksgiving, and unease. The steady patterns of life with traditions lived in this historic place, and a question somewhere in our minds of when the next shoe might drop. What do we do in times like these? The disciples in today's lesson must have felt the same way. They don't know quite what to think. Until now, life has been all right for them, some good, some bad, lots of uncertainty, of course, all of life is. But they found their sea legs in this part of the life that they're leading. There's a rhythm to the days to which the disciples have become accustomed. At first, they didn't know one another. They'd come from different places and have different backgrounds and different temperaments. But like any of us adults starting at a new university or a new job or joining a new organization, after some bumps along the road, the disciples now generally know what to expect each day. They have a sense of each other's strengths and weaknesses and of their own. They've seen the healing that Jesus can do, and they have heard his stump speech many times. They're no longer surprised constantly by what he says and how he acts. His messages are sinking in for them, getting ingrained into how they think and act too. Even with all the strangers who show up at the various places that they travel with Jesus, the disciples now think they know the routine, the types of questions people will raise, the emotions that will be evoked. They know the tricks of crowd control, how to find a place to sleep that night, which of them can cajole Jesus to wrap it up at the end of the day so they can get some rest before moving on to the next town. Each day with Jesus is different, of course, as each of our days is different, but over the broad strokes, the disciples know what to expect in this new life that Jesus has opened to them. And on balance, they are very thankful for what they have and their growing closeness with God. And then Jesus drops the bombshell. He takes the disciples away from their routine, away from the usual crowds, off from their life of spreading the good news. And when he gets them alone, he says to them, I'm going to be betrayed, be killed, be gone for days, and then return. I'm going to die. What? The disciples wonder, what does Jesus mean? Is it really true? It's not just that odd statement that Jesus plans to return after he dies. Even his very first words are hard to get past. Jesus is about to be betrayed and killed. What? Jesus drops the bombshell news on his disciples, breaking them out of their routine, and they don't know what to think or what to do. As the Gospel of Mark puts it, the disciples did not understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask him. Do you wonder why they were afraid to ask him? I'm guessing it's probably for all the same reasons we are sometimes afraid and don't ask questions. They didn't want to look stupid to their peers. They didn't want to be ridiculed by their teacher. They didn't really want, maybe, to hear the answers that Jesus might give. It's like us not wanting to go to the doctor because we're afraid of the diagnosis we'll get. The disciples would rather assume that they can figure out what to do by themselves, that they can make a plan to address the problem. So they find themselves saying, well, if Jesus were to die, which one of us could be the leader? Let's get out our resumes, conduct the interviews, decide which of us is the greatest, and the obvious heir apparent. I've done the same thing. Have you? When a bombshell lands and I don't understand it, my tendency is to leap into action. I'll dust off my credentials too and review my accomplishments and decide which of those past successes might be most relevant and plan to apply those skills, those lessons I've learned in the past, to this new situation. I get going and I get a plan, and in my first immediate response to the crisis, a bombshell that throws me off my game, I don't always stop to fully understand what's going on or to ask any questions to see if maybe the entire game has changed. I want a plan, and I want it now, and I want to do things the way I have done before. Control, can't we get it back? I want to do things the way almost all of us here have done before, the way the world almost always assesses things, the games we know. Who is the greatest? Get that person to run the show, to take control again, to right the listing ship. And then they all get to Capernaum, and there is a house there where they're gathering. And there's this awkward question from Jesus, what were you arguing about back there? Silence. It's embarrassing to say, well, we were planning who would take over once you're gone. But Jesus, who loved them, loves them until the end and beyond, and knows how hard this is for them. So he gathers them around him and says, whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. Whoever welcomes a child in my name welcomes me and the one who sent me. You see, Jesus has a different idea from the one that the disciples do when left to their own devices. Undoubtedly different from what many of us would do left to our own devices. Jesus says there are two different ways to see this world. One is the way that we are taught, the way we have all lived, the one where the person with the most skills wins, the one with the most success leads, the one with the highest record of achievement deserves the medal. It's a fair system because it's a meritocracy. We've all been told. Everyone gets to compete, and the one coming in first wins. But Jesus explains a second, radically different way of seeing the world, one with no meritocracy, one where everyone belongs, one where everyone gets the same prize, whatever their skill level, whatever their innate talents, whatever their successes, whatever their failures. So the prodigal son wastes all his inheritance and still gets welcomed home with great joy, not a scolding. And the workers in the fields who don't even start their day until 4 p.m. get paid the same whole day's wage as the worker who started at 9 in the morning. The woman caught in adultery is not stoned, and the tax collector eats dinner with Jesus, and the Roman soldier, that non-Jew, has his daughter healed by Jesus too. Lots of us get irked in this second economy. Elder brothers who follow all the rules. Workers who put in the full day's work. People who hate sin and love catching sinners. People who never cheat on their taxes. Good folks like us here. It's tough to have been so good for so long and then be rewarded by God just the same as those who are late to the party. But Jesus is clear. There are two economies. The world's economy, where the greatest lead, and God's economy, where everyone has sacred value. In the world's economy, leaders are those with the greatest skill or achievements in areas that the competitive market values. In God's economy, it's as important to know the name of your waiter as the name of your dining companions. In the world's economy, we all know the names of those who produce what consumers crave, but probably don't know the names of those who deliver what the poorest most need. In the world's economy, there may be some calculus in which it pays to exclude from our rich land all refugees from a war-torn land or all Muslims. But in God's economy, Jesus puts a little child in our midst, and an economically worthless little child, and says, the way you welcome her is the way you welcome me. In God's economy, we would all be rushing out to help the refugees and to stand with our Muslim leaders, all our Muslim friends, all of us beloved children of God. Oh, friends, the bombshell that went off for the disciples was this: that Jesus would die because he stood up for the least and the lost and the lonely against those in the world who had great power and cared more about keeping their power than using it for those desperate for help. That's what the disciples didn't really want to understand. When Jesus dropped the bombshell that he would die, they were afraid to ask him why. Most of us, if we have any power at all in the world, are afraid to fully understand why he died. Because once we fully understand what Jesus was willing to die for, it means those of us with any power are also called to share ours, or to use it freely and generously for our brothers and sisters as much as we use it for ourselves. Because everyone is valued equally in God's economy, all deserving of God's bounty. Can one really be a servant in this competitive economy? Yes, but it's costly. It cost Jesus his life. But for all those who chose to follow him, those with skills and those without, they all come to understand that they're valued with a sacred value that nothing can ever take away. No market crash, no competitor, no failure. And when the bombshells explode, that's the best shelter of all. A rock on which we can count. One worth giving great thanks for over and over and over.